Greetings, dear friends, our guests, subscribers to my channel, to Oleksiy's channel. This is live stream. We are recording live. Hello, Oleksiy. Good evening. Good evening, Alexander. Well, the speed of events is really amazing. So much motion, so many things are happening in the world. Witkoff supposedly is flying to Moscow with a stop in Ireland, then no, he is not flying anywhere. Then Zelenskyy is talking to him with the mayor, with Starber, with Macron. In France today there was a glimmer of power, and Ukrainian Pravda is writing that Zelenskyy is back in shape, like back in 2022. We'll talk about all that. However, the format of our stream is traditional, unchangeable, unwavering every week, so we ask you to send us questions in advance, and at the end of the stream we usually dedicate the second half to answering your questions. Also, in YouTube, on both channels, you can look up the announcement of the next meeting, the next tag. You can either go to our sites and do commentary and ask questions directly, or you can ask them under the future announced stream. And that will, of course, be happening today. Also, I have to draw your attention to a couple of QR codes. The ones next to me, that barcode leads you to ask questions on my channel. The QR code next to Oleksiy leads you to his school of thought and communication, so you can go there and explore this world with Oleksiy and with his school. All right, traditionally, as always, we start with a question. And today's question is as follows. If Zelenskyy is to leave, how will that affect the speed of peace process? And here are the options. Everything will speed up. Number two, everything will become chaotic and longer and take more time. Third, no way, it will not affect things anyway. Everything is pre-programmed. It's part of a scenario pre-agreed upon. And option number four, Zelenskyy will be holding onto his throne with his fingers and teeth, and it's too early to talk about resignation. And this question was inspired by the post of Vladimir Petrov, who was posting that Zelenskyy will come to make his speech at the New Year's night. He'll probably sign everything about December, mid-December 15th or December 20th. And then at the New Year's announcement speech, he will say that he is tired and he is leaving. So, Oleksiy, what do you think? Which option is more realistic? I think the most realistic, Alexander, would be when Zelenskyy leaves and somebody else will be signing documents after him. Russians would be refusing to sign anything with him. Seems to be the matter of the principle for them. And yet you still have to sign things, so not many options are left. How some other person, perhaps sympathetic to certain layers of society in Ukraine. Right, okay, sorry. Wait a second. Zaluzhny visited Ukraine, taking pictures with his wife in front of his home, saying things are good at home, and people are paying attention, saying that Zaluzhny perhaps is visiting the country not for nothing, and there might be additional political turbulence inside. Oh, we'll see what happens with Zaluzhny. We don't know, right? Maybe he came to Ukraine to pick his winter clothes for cold Britain in January. Alexei, you're full of humor today. Okay, so I think the option for Zelenskyy to leave by himself is just, I think, is a fantastic option. No, Alexander. In my view, him leaving himself is actually a rather probable option, because that'll be part of the deal. And I think it seems to me that Zelenskyy is leaving, and then some David will be signing the peace accord. Oh, like David and Goliath? Perhaps. All right, guys, you can vote at the poll of the stream. Comment from PrivateerStation. That poll is under the original stream. The link is below in the description if you want to participate or ask questions. Okay, back to casting. So, Oleksiy, I think that Zelenskyy's visit to France is exclusively to make sure that French support will affect United States somehow, because it appears that United States are leaning towards ending this war in the fastest possible fashion. And do you think he will succeed? Because of yesterday's conversation with Witkoff and Rubio and the Merov and delegation, today's meeting with them, what is Witkoff bringing to Moscow after all this? Listen, Alexander, this document, I think, is mostly agreed upon. There are only two cornerstones that need to be resolved before it can be signed. So, number one, territorial concessions, whether Ukraine will have to leave the already mostly occupied districts of Ukraine for Russia. And second, whether Ukraine will take voluntary obligation to not head towards NATO, remove this article from Constitution, and reiterate that they're a neutral country without joining any international military organizations. So with that, Witkoff is going to Moscow. Moscow will react to that somehow, but here one needs to understand that regardless whether it's Zelenskyy, Rakhamia, Zaluzhny, Stefanchuk, or anybody, not so important for these two articles. What's important is whether they will go for that or not. Zelenskyy could not go for these two articles because he connects his political future with these two articles. Perhaps naively, he's still doing that. When he will run out of political future, and he's running a risk of running out of all future, other politicians would not be constrained by these two articles. Say Zaluzhny or Rakhamia. All the unfavored elements of ending this war, yes, they will be on their shoulders. Perhaps for the first 2 months they can point at Zelenskyy, but after that it becomes your war and your problems and your responsibility. And the fact that we might change Zelenskyy for Zaluzhny or Rakhamia, that would not change how many Ukrainians are dying at the front. Russians will not run out of UAVs. So every follower of Zelenskyy will always bump into the same issue, same complex of issues that led Ukraine to the problem that it cannot continue the war physically as a social system, as a country. To be more particular, it still can, but it probably very likely shouldn't, because it's teetering on the threshold of strategic dismantling, where it will not be an agreement, but will be a capitulation document. For now, we're not talking about capitulation. For now, it's peace agreements. All those who use capitulation word now, they're just toying with the emotions of the voters. But if we continue in this direction, we may actually face capitulation at some point. What would be a capitulation like, Oleksiy? Oh, that would be not 19 points. That would be like 119 points, all of them not in our favor. A list of different things we owe to Russia that will leave a feeling of despise and rejection with every Ukrainian. So for now, what we have, those 19 articles, that's relatively okay. You can still argue who has won, who has prevailed. Both sides can address it as the victory. When it's a real capitulation, one side is out. There is no way to address what's signed as a victory. So the question remains, who wants to continue war? Zaluzhny is outlining his position by his recent publication, saying that I, back in 22, understood that ending the war is important and political climate in the peaceful country is a much better thing to manage. So he just was not stopping the war in the inopportune moment. So he's already defining his position. If he becomes the head of the cabinet, whoever he becomes instead of Zelenskyy, temporary, or the head of the Committee of National Rescue, or whatever we call it, and perhaps he would need to sign it, he might say that he does not want to leave the district and remove the NATO. What do you think will happen? War, right. The war will continue, and he will be the one to blame for everything. So he will be the one to blame in Basification, in the drafting commission abuses, in lack of infantry on the front, in us losing other townships. And I think somebody in the West will likely remember his probable participation in the blow-up of the Nord Stream pipelines, because Americans will be pressing without any concerns for other considerations. They will be pressing to reach peace with this war between Ukraine and Russia, and they're not stopping. So anybody who will be objecting to that will likely be losing his political future to some degree. And all the potential candidates understand that very well. So I think what will happen, regardless of who takes his place, will sign the peace accords. And then Ukraine will have elections. All right, Alexei, there were a lot of ruminations today about Yermak, different leaks, different insights. And one could see, and that is very interestingly described in the Ukrainian press, that Yermak might try to resign, and then Zelensky will refuse to sign his resignation and will fight for him. That was the sentiment. You, as the person who have been in this office twice, I cannot not ask you about these somewhat dirty details of Fyodorov, Budanov, and Maluk supposedly visiting. Yermak was very angry. He did not believe that he will be resigned. What we heard in the previous few days, that he will even join the army and fight on the front. On one hand, it tells me that this is definitely an emotional story with emotional context, that somebody will fight for him probably, like Zelensky will probably hold it. On the other hand, why are you going to Ukrainian army? So that if there are any questions, it'll be a different agency investigating you and not DBR, not the ones that investigates the high-level corruption. So this is, in my view, this was 100% emotional decision. Yermak and the army, rather incompatible. Just let him go, fire him. Well, this is interesting. And one can see that maybe, yes, his investigation will be moved from one agency to another. On the other hand, we should not forget that the ones who are fighting on the front, they may fall under amnesty for different reasons. So that may be part of a bigger strategic play. As for dirty details, I am frankly not really interested in that, Alexander. I don't care who visited, what they talk about. In this case, that's in the realm of rumors. You may even agree with some of that, what is discussed, but it doesn't bother my radar. You really think, Alexei, that he was hoping for Zelensky to fight for him? Don't know, but I think the scandal is so high that, and the details presented to Zelensky were so convincing that there was no chance for him to even attempt to fight for Yermak. Do you think this is a sign that Zelensky is weak? Oh yeah, Zelensky is about 70% weak now than from his total 100 of strength. And not that Yermak was providing those 70% with his presence, but because the politician who gives up on his own close friends, nobody will believe him. Power agencies, congressmen, future appointees, nobody will trust him from his nearest circle, because he just showed that he is not fighting for his team. Dubinsky used today, I think, a very precise name in this regard. Somewhat dirty, but I think it's a proper name for that. It's called gauze underwear, an equivalent of holy underwear with holes in them, or very old in them, the one that holds nothing, or worn out granny panties. So I don't know who in the Mirror of the Week or Ukrainian Pravda tried to push for Zelensky being energetic and dynamic. In reality, he is facing a catastrophe of trust. So, okay, Alexei, if we're seeing Zelensky as a limping duck, what should we expect from the continuation of war? It did appear from the outside rather wild when Zelensky, visiting France, and I understand it's the classics of this genre, when Zelensky leaves the country, we always face some tragic attack from Russia. It usually somehow happens when he's leaving the country, the most vicious attacks happen. So today in Dnieper, Russia hit a factory, up to 40 wounded, 4 dead, horrible event, and of course more attacks happen. And Zelensky comes out and says, do not read international media, do not read Russian media, do not trust all that. Rely on Ukrainian sources. If we speak about Kupiansk, we actually kicked all the Russians from out of there. And this is just Russian propaganda saying that it's somewhat prevailing around Kupiansk, and it's fake that Russia is winning this war. The fact that he is saying that in France, under what circumstances, it gives us a lot of ground for consideration. And situation on the battlefront, regardless of his statements, is still catastrophic. And last time we analyzed that this line is already broken in 2/3 of the front that we're holding. So why do you think he's pushing such a manipulation in regards to the situation on the front? Why is he pushing it to the media? Oh, that's simple. So they would not be asking him, how did you afford for that to happen? Because if he comes and says that, yeah, we have a catastrophe on the front, the first question from media would be, so what did you do? How did you make it happen? How did your decisions lead to that catastrophe? So his position is, yeah, it's hard, but we're fighting and succeeding. Hard so that would not be attacked much, and repelling because he doesn't want to be asked questions why. As for the front, Russia is not winning in this war. They prospectively have a huge advantage on this war. Strategically, they have a big advantage, and it has a perspective of victory, or what will look like victory, because Ukraine armed forces are strategically depleting, and that will be the reason for the front to collapse if we continue playing the same strategy. So nobody knows when will it happen, but this perspective exists. So Russia made 3 proper decisions early on, and that helps them to, in this war, to be in this strategic position. That Ukraine is also getting weaker as time passes, and the United States also actively push for peace treaty. So we also have a perspective of possible collapse of the front, and weekly we have significant strikes that we miss shooting down, and Russians succeed in continuously destroying our energy systems. So the package that we're getting, in my view, is actually ideal, the package of treaty articles. I think we should be taking it. Of course, we can trade for NATO, for Donetsk district, but yeah, this is nuance. I think it's not the main principal items of this thing. We should agree to the treaty and continue going forward. What's cornerstone, in my view, our system needs to collapse. We need to change that system. Because if you put on the existing system, even the Archangel Gabriel with other angels in the existing system, they will not be able to turn the system around. We need to dismantle it and build a new. Because the current one is corrupt, ineffective, and also functioning mostly in the war mode. It's profiteering from this war. And it doesn't matter who will be heading it. Okay, so we're talking about the change of system. We'll talk about the front today too, Oleksiy. There are some interesting townships that were announced by the Russian side. Ukraine is still quiet as always. And we'll go through that a bit later. But let's first look at the systemic comment that you made. This logic that, figuratively speaking, our parliament can regroup, and it's a very delicate time there, the budgeting time, right? That nobody is there to vote for, apparently. And it's a very interesting time for trade and contradictions and fight for different fractions in the parliament. They always had moments when everything was voted by the call from the president. But today, now, it's a different story. The budget that has no money, the budget that is concocted from whatever is given to Ukraine from the West, and congressmen lining up in front of the West to present themselves in a better light than Zelensky, than his cohorts, and supposedly corrupt structures. So if we take the logic of parliament change, perhaps new coalition, new speaker, do you see that speaker leading the country instead of Zelensky? It's not that he will have or she will have to choose for that. That person will have to lead the country, because when Zelensky leaves his position, there won't be anybody more legitimate than the parliament. So the head of the parliament will be specifically in the eyes of international community, will be led by the parliament leader. So it'll be an option, so-called Turchinov 2.0, temporary executive figure fulfilling presidential obligations until we conduct elections. So do you think Russians will be stopped by that system? Frankly, Russians prefer the existing systems because that's the one that make Ukraine ineffective. Russians will likely just insist on obtaining certain security guarantees from Ukraine, so that if Ukraine remains an anti-Russian project, it would have limited capabilities to affect Russian politics or Russian country. The question of changing the system is completely Ukrainian. Maybe Europeans also will step in, because Ukraine is absolutely dependent on Europe and the United States, and they after war will probably not be inclined in building another corruption system in Ukraine. I think they understood who we are, looking at the tens of billions stolen money, B with a B, billions. The Office of EU prosecution is reviewing a case for billions against Zelensky administration. So since they have seen the degree of theft in Ukraine, they're not okay with letting this slide after the war. They want to change the system to something better. How it will change and what will Ukrainian people vote for, how will they control this politics, that's another question. How ready is the politician to change himself or our political spectrum? Last time, Oleksiy, you made a supposition, and this week I see it being affirmed again and again. It's not an axiom yet, but it's definitely being awaited by a lot of people. You said that Trump might suggest Zelensky to leave the office, and just a couple of minutes before our today's stream, the representative of the White House, Caroline Leavitt, comes out and says that Trump administration is very optimistic about the chances for deal with Ukraine. And Danny Kemp, the correspondent in the White House, that's how the correspondent presents this message, these words. So let's understand, what articles do Americans imply for that deal with Ukraine, for that agreement with Ukraine? Because if you remember our delegation, their faces were very sad. They were gray. They were feeling presenting themselves in a very concerned, precarious position. Meantime, Rubio was saying that they are for future, they are for peace deal, they are for future for Ukraine and guarantee security guarantees. Oh, I think the main thing is that they're discussing, for America is discussing the point of Zelenskyy's resignation. And I think at best, Zelenskyy will be facing the destiny of the leader of Georgia, the country, Saakashvili. I think in 24, he had the last reasonable offer to change his mind. And after that, in the language of political detectives, his future was already sentenced. He will be given certain guarantees, so he would leave, and he would not crumble and hold onto the throne to the last. And then in the next couple of years, things might happen. Some accounts of his might get arrested. He might become a persona non grata to most countries. And then perhaps he will end up in some sanctuary in Israel, or maybe given back to Ukraine, where he likely will be put in jail for stuff. I think that's where the vector is leading us to. So what about the deal with Ukraine, between Ukraine and the United States, Oleksiy? Well, they cannot officially declare that deal with Ukraine is the deal with Zelenskyy resignation, right? If you expect to hear that, you won't. And Rubio did make a good remark, saying that Ukraine, you should not be asking for missiles. You should be asking us for 10 years of liberation from any tariffs. And frankly, I think this is a stronger option for Ukraine. This is a better option. But in any case, this deal would be not with Ukraine as a country, but with those people who are representing Ukraine right now. So they will be likely asking, as a part of a deal, questions of their personal liberty, personal judicial amnesty. And the problem is, I think, that most of Zelenskyy's cabinet are concerned with their own security. and not with the security of the country, not with the future of the country, while America is mostly concerned with the future of Ukraine in this case. Funny enough, right, how it works. But actually, America is offering pretty good deals, pretty good terms to Ukraine, I think. The problem is who is signing it from Ukraine. And by the way, Americans generally can guarantee political future to whoever signs, and whoever first understands that and becomes the first leader in Ukraine to do that, he will win the contest of the champions and likely will hold the throne here. So, Oleksiy, there were a lot of discussions today about who might be instead of Yermak. How will that deal with America will evolve? Alexander, I'll interrupt you here. Doesn't matter who will be instead of Yermak. Absolutely inconsequential. That person will not be able to fill in Yermak's shoes. He will not be able to be basically a vice president, the second president in the country. The construct that the power of Zelensky was standing upon has crumbled. And for now, to change the format and the coalitions in the parliament, just 5 congressmen are needed to change the existing coalition. So they likely will. And whoever is Zelensky placing instead of Yermak doesn't matter. The main focus now is figure out who's signing the documents. The others need certain guarantees of safety. These new ones will need guarantees of their political future. And then they'll be discussing the matters of Zelensky leaving the picture and probably the future of Ukraine and NATO, how it will be shaped. I would really give quite a bit to see who would be a political suicide person figure who would decide to step instead of Yermak and chain himself or herself to the corpse of Zelensky that is about to float down the river. Political corpse. So we did talk about Zelensky being weak. It is visible after Yermak's resignation. Oh, Alexander, he's not just weak. He cannot do shit. Everything was recorded, right? In the Mindich tapes, Attorney General, Zelensky himself, his vice, second in command, everybody, the whole government are on those tapes. And you can easily control that in their behavior with dumping more materials. So he's completely weak. The only thing he can trade for is guarantees of security for himself. And it's being presented outward as security guarantees for Ukraine. He doesn't have other options. And you can only change that for a pro-Ukrainian position to restore some sympathy of the society and some political assetry to hold yourself for a little longer while trading for personal guarantees. That's it. That's what's happening. Oleksiy, there was, the scene is unfolding in an interesting way. Apparently Danilov has an inner nickname of Khukhrya, which can be translated to English as like thingamajib, whatchamacallit, or even doohickey, so something inconsequential or unimportant. I want to share here a little more inner knowledge of the office. I usually don't bring it out in public, but this one has a meaning out of the moral duty in front of our society. So one day I was talking to Yermak in the office, and Yermak was complaining about Danilov. I was asking why. It was Tuesday, the sanctions day, when we were giving lists to Americans for sanctions. He was complaining that Danilov is bringing 2,000 to 3,000 people into that list. So they were massively putting labels of enemies or foreign agents on those people. And Yermak was complaining that there's no way for me to explain that to Americans because Americans are checking those names. And Yermak was always arguing with Danilov to limit himself at 100 or 200 people, not by thousands. And that continued for years. So you can imagine the scale of these inner things. And that Lugansk person, Danilov, was coming out to the microphones and saying that I'm not speaking Russian, right? As I said, the whole Zelensky's office is consisting of 2 sides. One is decorations that are presented to the media, And the other side is the behind the scenes, the corruption and the bribery and thievery of such a scale that there's nowhere to put a label on these people. Okay, friends, don't forget to leave your notes in the commentary. And by the way, please don't forget to click like and subscribe. This does help us a lot, more than you think. And I want to continue here, Oleksiy, with other things that affect the life inside Ukraine. There are more and more voices coming saying that people do want to finish this war somehow, that the public sentiment is leading towards finishing this war. Yet Zelensky still has some layer of society that he relies upon. And in the logical sphere, okay, it's pretty straightforward. We are trading with the United States. Zelensky is trading with US for his skin, for his future, so he can leave Donbass and leave the country, and it would be easier for people too, right? But that damned narrative, what did the guys and girls die for? It remains, it still permeates. Oh, we're looking now for the answer, what did our people die for? Or how to behave with the society. What such a leader as Zelensky needs to tell the society when he's already knowing that his main objective is to flee and leave the country alive and go to some hideout. And he probably understands that if he'll start giving territories to Russia or giving concessions, he likely will be dismantled and his life may end here in the country. Well, one note here, Alexander. Donbass will likely be signed off not by Zelensky, but by the next person in power. As for what did everybody die for, one can easily point that everybody who is serving Ukraine in these hard times of war, those who died, they all have deserved a significant memory, a significant position in the Ukrainian society. For those who are still serving and who are alive, they need to be thanked profusely for their service, for helping the country. We need to make sure there are rehabilitation programs available for them. They would not give them much political privilege, but we do need to care them. And frankly, a lot of Ukrainians should be rewarded for their service during this time. We need to rebuild society that is thankful for those who served in the country, but we're not giving them specific political or other advantage in this system. What, in the meantime, those patriots, in quotes, who are continuously fighting and screaming that we fight to the end, their agreement is that they want to have a different advantage in the society as the result of their fierceness. And they do have a group that supports them. So the cornerstone thing in this story is to make sure that we give the voice to majority. And in this voice, there should be also well pronounced the voices of minorities, for example, ethnic minorities and political minorities and like. And it is a delicate construction, complex one. We need a centrist, complex project that would start to execute on the constitution and laws of the Ukraine. And, we have to be precise. If our laws must put somebody in the kindergarten for bullying a child, a 3-year-old child in the kindergarten, that person needs to go to jail, regardless of how he or she is supported by other people, regardless by public opinion. If there is a law and constitution, we need to make sure we are building a centrist project that adheres to the law, that does not elevate anybody above it, that those who need to be punished will get punished, those that need to be noticed and rewarded will get rewarded. We just need to start executing on our constitution as it is. We need to practice it. It's an interesting practice, trust me. Have been abandoned in Ukraine for a while, but we can bring things in place if we start acting on it. And if we have those 3 million of national patriots, screamers who want to destroy and dismantle Bulgakov and everybody else with anything Russian in their past. These screamers are tough only to the first 5 criminal prosecutions happen. You put the first 5 in jail, and after that, for violations, not for nothing, but for actual violations. After that, majority of those will take more centrist position, more legal positions, defensible positions. Of course, there'll be a small group likely of the ones who will be in the extreme. They always exist in every society, but there are ways to deal with them. So we need to level the society. It's very disbalanced now. It's like the ship that is leaning to one side. We need to make sure we pump the water out, we level it so it can continue going forward. And the main task that we have in Ukraine is not external. External politics is the continuation of an inner politics. Our main problems lie inside. We need to first make things working inside Ukraine, and only then we can deal with externalities. The matters of church, the matters of language, the matters of public culture. This is the whole complex of measures. You need to demobilize the army, right? A big chunk of it. Not all of it. You need to hold the borders, right? But you need to perhaps cut it in half. You need to make sure the society accepts these people, thanks these people, create conditions that they will not be screaming about having special benefits, special caste-like benefits in the society, but they would be respected, and they would have future in the country, and the country will have future with them. And we need to start rebuilding the country. But economic revival will only happen if we build a centrist project here. If you read at the cornerstone document of NATO, it has a very interesting article there that says one of the key tasks of NATO was also the fight against nationalism in Europe. This is actually written there. So these 3 to 5 millions that we have in Ukraine that are marching with ultra-nationalistic slogans, they fail to understand that there will be no NATO on these slogans, and nobody will give you money, nobody will support you rebuilding the country. So the core task of a new power will be to equalize Ukrainian citizens in their rights. What is written already in our constitution? Independence for languages, religious, ethnic minorities, and preferences. And this is the basis for stabilization of society and even perhaps return of some of the Ukrainians back to the country. Plus, it'll be the best pill, such an inner politics, to make sure that the war with Russian Federation or anybody else never happens again. Zelensky managed to spoil relations with this fierce help of ultra-nationalist 3 to 5 million supporters. He quarreled with almost every neighbor. Give me one neighboring country with whom we do have good relations right now. So this is a big task for us to rebuild. Strong government, strong economy, good relations, good normal relations with everybody, including Belarus and Russian Federation. This may only occur if our inner politics is equalized. Then the foreign policies will also equalize. That's the main task. How the participants of the next contest are ready to solve it, from Arachamia to Zaluzhny, that's a big question, but that's the most important question right now. Not who will have the Donetsk region, but what are you going to do with the remaining huge territory of Ukraine? Yeah, Russia took 20% off. We might leave 1% more to them. What are you going to do with the remaining 79%? Ukraine, even with that 21%, is still the biggest country in Europe. What are you going to do with this country? Are you going to execute the constitution? You're going to act upon your legal documents? Yes, it is sad to lose Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka, Slavyansk, Drushkovka, but if it is the price for development, for growth, and while nobody is listening to us, the price to pay for 3 to 4 years of what this political regime was doing to this country, this is a light price to pay. We could have paid a lot worse. Not that I wanted Ukraine to pay more. I would prefer us not to pay for our mistakes, but on the weight, this is relatively light punishment for all the weirdness that was happening in the country. and all the corruption that was happening, because there were layers of society that were selling the country apart, making money and making their lives on the war trade. And I would say that under right administration, even these 79% of Ukraine may have 1.5 trillion GDP in about 15 years, if you have a wish, if you have a desire to be there. Or do you want to create another corrupt system and that'll be taking bites out of a new Ukraine? And what will be in the Donetsk region, whether we will join NATO, where they likely will never take us ever. Americans basically leaked this information that Ukraine may leave this article in Constitution, but on our side we'll make sure that Ukraine will never get into NATO. And you can keep it in your Constitution, you can wave these flags for the next 70 years. If you do not expel it from Constitution, we will add it to NATO that we're not taking Ukraine in. And what then? All right, Alexei, let's hang on, Alexander. I want to remind of my favorite saying that a man is not the one who knows how to fight, but the one who knows who is the enemy. The enemy for Ukraine is not Russia. Russia is a secondary enemy. It's an adversary, not real enemy. The enemy of Ukraine is an inner enemy, is an inner decomposition or deterioration of us not following Constitution, our inner corruption. It's not the problem that Ukraine is anti-Russia. The problem is that Ukraine is anti-Ukraine. It's anti-people regime that we have now. The population of Ukraine dwindled since we got independence. Now they're counting what? From 38 millions down to what? It's more than we lost during the Second World War. This is anti-human regime. We need to build a new one, facing people. And then after that, external politics will straighten up. You'll see that all these imperial advancements of Russia would be irrelevant anymore if Ukraine will balance its inner politics. There'll be no reasons for neighbors to attack this country. And that would perhaps be the best guarantee to avoid the next round of war. You know, Alexei, it reminded me, I think, a lot of things are coming together here at this moment. What this Mindich gate has actually uncovered. I think it uncovered a very archetypical trauma of our society, of our country. This hatred of Jews that we have in our country. Here we can see that even Jews are against Jews. Very interesting things coming out of this scandal. Kuleba coming out and saying that personally in 2024, when he was still in position, was saying that let's be friends with Kushner. I have access to him. I am Minister of Foreign Affairs. I can arrange the negotiations. And then Yermak convinced me that we need to be friends with Pompeo and we should dump Kushner. And now we see that Kushner with friends of Kolomoisky, they're being very active and they're taking out the other Jews, supposedly. It's different sides of the same group in the country, taking out each other. So maybe our Ukrainian problem is that the higher you get on the steps of power, the fewer actual Ukrainians are there. I'm saying scary things, but it does make me ask this question. Listen, Alexander, I do not want to divide people into Ukrainians, Jews, Russians. People can be divided into good people and bad people. People with ethics and without. Zelensky and Yermak were offered to have direct communications, exclusive communications with leading Republicans who at that time were not elected yet, were not in the office yet, but did not rule the country and the states. But we were working on making sure there are connections. And yet Zelensky and his government renounced and refused to accept them. Even after 3 times, the biggest senators, one of the leading senators and congressmen of the United States have visited Ukraine 3 times Republicans, when Ukrainians just turned them down for their mercantile and other reasons. They were drinking Biden's Kool-Aid and Biden's monetary support, and they did not see that it's good for Ukraine to be friends with both sides of political spectrum. They were just busy pumping their own money. Biden is gone, but Ukraine is still suffering. So, okay, tomorrow, Putin and Witkoff, what do you think will be offered? Many people are saying there is nothing to offer. Perhaps we don't know something. What do you mean there is nothing to offer, Alexander? There's always a way to offer an agreed upon plan that likely will have NATO and some other cornerstones that need addressing. For example, Ukraine may say that it's important for us to have NATO in the constitution. America can say, sure, we can write in the NATO documents that Ukraine is never accepted. And it's an exit for Putin. It's an option for Putin. He can agree and say, listen, here's what I achieved, that Ukraine, now NATO will never take Ukraine. So, and okay, they might agree that, for example, speaking of Donetsk district, right, Ukraine may leave the actual territory and the Russian border will go along the existing front line, but the remaining piece of territory can become the jointly managed gray zone. There are options, or NATO troops, or European, you can make some peacekeepers, Brazilian, Indian, doesn't matter. It's just somebody. These are nuanced details. You know, Turkish troops are very conditionally the troops of NATO, but they can be there. So there are ways to resolve it if there is a strategic desire to finish it on this stage. And it seems that Russia is trying to conclude it. They will find ways to agree upon. And they, even if they don't agree now, they might say what they want to achieve, to get in order to finish it. On the other hand, they may use certain issues that they have with this plan to first win more time to capture Donetsk district themselves and push the front line further and deeper. And second, to make sure that Ukraine side gets even more pressure and more compromising materials would be leaked against the Ukrainian government, because the chaos of Ukrainian leadership is absolutely in favor for Russia and how it affects future elections. So yeah, they can pull it further. They can even push it out to May of next year. I don't think they have too big of a runway. They will eventually be put to a table of negotiations, but they do have perhaps half a year. And also there is a position of China to consider in these negotiations. Right, I wanted to talk about China because Macron mentioned that he will be flying to China and he will talk to Chinese leader to exert some pressure onto Russia. How do you read Macron? Oh, Macron is trying to hold his falling political pants, I think, in this case. And we probably should not be paying too much attention to his statements. Macron, in a position of a lame duck, is not a powerful figure on the international arena. And the second point here is that, according to certain data, the United States are staying quiet about Taiwan and China is not mentioning Venezuela. They might have some agreement in this regard. So what I'm saying is that the war in Ukraine will be stopped temporarily or permanently. It will depend entirely or to the largest degree on what Ukraine will be doing with itself, not with the United States or with Russia. The war may take some time to be concluded, not tomorrow, but perhaps April or May in some historically visible time frame, after which there'll be elections held and questions will be answered where Ukraine is going. Cornerstone questions: the number of armed forces in Ukraine. We cannot stay without them. And it's a guarantee for us to have a stable country, especially in the political mess that we are facing now. We need strong economy and strong enforcement agencies and good relations with our neighbors, including Russia and Belarus. And this will be the basis for change of the projectivity in Ukraine, and we basically need to start following our constitution. Of course, I would want the war to end tomorrow, but if it concludes in May, this stuff that we were talking about here will be just more actualized. Would have lost more people, some more territory, and disappointment will be growing in our society as well. But I do foresee in the near future, within a year, less than a year, we likely will be finishing this war. Does Russia have potentiality to continue fighting? Yes, on certain terms, but it does depend upon the position of China and the United States as well. And Putin is visiting India right after meeting with Witkoff. Probably will be talking about something there as well. India is another important pillar of this geometric figure. End of the first hour.